Now, war with Ukraine and trade with China dominated the talks between Russian President Vladimir Putin and his Chinese counterpart Xi Jinping on their first day of visit to Beijing. Putin said that he was grateful to China for Ukraine's peace initiatives, while Xi Jinping said both he and Putin agreed on the need for political solution to Ukraine's conflict. The Russian president hailed the growing trade between the two countries despite what he called, and I'm quoting, some actions on the part of third countries.
Безусловно, я со своей стороны проинформирую председателя Китайской Народной Республики о ситуации, которая складывается вокруг украинского кризиса. Мы признательны китайским друзьям, коллегам за те инициативы, которые они выдвигают по урегулированию этой проблемы.
China, on the other hand, took a neutral position on the Ukraine conflict, but also backed Moscow's contentions that Russia was provoked into attacking Ukraine. As the two leaders met, kicking off Putin's two-day state visit, Xi Jinping hailed ties with Russia as conducive to peace and pledged to strengthen cooperation further.
我向你和俄罗斯人民再次表示衷心的祝贺，相信在你的领导下，俄罗斯国家发展建设一定能够取得新的更大成就。庆祝中俄建交75周年是贯穿今年两国关系发展的主线。
Now, to take this further, we are being joined by Ambassador Volker Stanzel from Berlin. He is the former German ambassador to China and Japan and also Senior Distinguished Fellow at German Institute for International and Security Affairs. Mr. Stanzel, thank you so much for joining us here on WION. I want to ask you, do you think the war in Ukraine is the only reason bringing Beijing and Moscow closer?
It is maybe the most important reason, but it's only one of, let's say, three. The first is the development of the war that you have already described, with the Ukraine seeing a perspective that is increasingly bleak, with the first successes of the commencing summer offensive from the Russian armed forces. And that leads, as we all observe, to increasing fatalism in both among supporters of Ukraine and maybe in Ukraine itself. That is one factor, I think, and it is maybe the dominant one. The second one is the failure of Xi Jinping to wean the Europeans away from the side of the United States. He made an effort when he visited France, Serbia, and Hungary, and before that had spoken to the German Chancellor, and he had to discover that this is not the moment where he could drive a wedge between the partners of the transatlantic alliance. So that leads to the third point, I think, and that makes him bet strongly on something that I would compare to the great power alliances that we used to have in Europe in the 19th and early 20th century, leading up to the First World War, of course, where big powers toyed with each other, changing alliances and becoming increasingly threatening to each other. And I think the enthusiasm that both Putin and Xi Jinping expressed, and you have quoted both of them, transcends what we have seen so far, which was basically a relationship looking at economic opportunities like arms technology exports from China to Russia and energy imports from Russia to China.
Ambassador Stanzel, speaking of that, the two leaders have focused on trade in today's meeting. We have seen trade ties since the war in Ukraine balloon between the two countries. But when one actually analyzes it, turns out that Moscow is much more dependent on Beijing. Do you think Moscow can actually trust Beijing fully?
Well, 2 points. You say a ballooning trade exchange, but that is confined to very limited areas. As I said, arms technology on the one hand and energy on the other, but even the energy exports from Russia are not that significant for China. That I think is an important factor. The other one is that we see maybe I mean, maybe we have for a long time regarded Putin as the little brother of China. But what is happening now, and if we listen to the language Xi Jinping uses, that makes me think that maybe Putin is regarded with a lot of admiration by Beijing too, because after all, since 20 years in power, he usually knows how to get what he wants, ruthlessly, maybe even going to war, and he has not been defeated yet at all. That is something that I think from the perspective of a fellow Communist Party, a comrade in arms, so to say, I think must look pretty impressive. So it may be much more a balanced relationship than what we have been suspecting for a long time, maybe too long a time.
Ambassador Stanzel, very quickly, do you think this alliance that we are seeing being formed, and as you put it, the little brother and I would call the big brother, do you think this should be a cause for concern for Europe?
Not only for Europe. It has a geopolitical side to it which concerns everybody in the world. You have a big power, a great power alliance that is obviously actively cooperating and, I used the word before, ruthlessly to get what it wants. It needs to be watched by China's and Russia's partners in the world.
All right, Ambassador Stanzel, thank you so much for speaking with us. It was a pleasure.
You're welcome. Thank you.
For all the latest news, download the WION app and subscribe to our YouTube channel.